This is Dave Dreher with Northeast Ohio Music Scene. I've got on the line with me today the one and only Joe Satriani. Joe, I cannot express to you how privileged I feel to be speaking with you.
Well, thank you very much. It's nice to talk to you today.
I've got so many things I'd love to talk with you about, but we are here with a purpose today. We're here to talk about your upcoming G3 performance at the Hard Rock Rocksino at Northfield Park on February 22nd. I've got to admit to you, Joe, I've never seen a G3 performance. I'm so looking forward to this.
Oh, wow. Yeah, the G3 shows are so much fun. There's a special energy that surrounds these that is very unique. And this time around, the chemistry between Phil, John, and myself is really great. We've been having a blast.
Now, G3, of course, any guitar fan is very aware of these, and you've been doing these shows since about 1995, correct? But you trade out your two fellow guitarists.
Yes, yeah, you're right. I started this crazy idea back in '95 as I complained to my managers that that the success had been great and I was touring around the world, but how come I never got to hang around with my fellow guitarists? And I just, success can be isolating actually, and old rules of show business really do try to keep competitors away from each other. But I was thinking like a fan, and I thought, well, why can't I see my favorite guitar players all at once at the same night having a good time? And I thought, well, then I should do something about that. So it just took a year, really, to convince not only promoters and artist managers, but the artists themselves that it was going to be a cool thing to do, to stand next to two other guys who might be better than you that night, or in general, or better than you at something, but that the audience probably already made up their mind who they liked the best, so that's not what they were there to do. They were actually there to enjoy the music and celebrate the electric guitar with us. It sounds easy when I say it now, but at the time it seemed so contrary to what everyone had been taught in the industry. But we did our first show in October of '96, and the rest is history. It turned into a phenomenon that we've been taking around the globe since then, and I'm so happy for it because it's so artistically rewarding. It's musically invigorating, and it's just plain fun. Every night we do a show.
So it's hard to believe here we are 22, 23 years later, and it's still going strong. Some might even say stronger than ever. How do you choose who is going to be the other two members in G3? Is it is it a lottery? Is it just you decide this is somebody I really want to play with? What's the thought process that goes into it?
Well, it's a bit of a combination of everything that you mentioned. It starts with me being interested in playing with certain players that I think have qualities that are unique and than mine, talents that stretch beyond the things that I can do. And also I look for that third person that also will add an unusual chemistry. So sometimes we take someone who's more of a blues player, mix them with someone who's more of a metal player, or a primary instrumentalist, or someone who works with a vocal band. The difficulty, of course, is that some players don't like to step out of their bands and be a solo artist. Some artists don't like to step out of the bands, period. Some artists don't like playing with other guitar players. They want all the room for themselves, and then sometimes it's just a matter of the fact that no one's available because everybody is booked a year and a half to 2 years in advance, and it's very difficult to tie people down. So you put all that together, and there's one last element that's really hard, and it's my responsibility basically to sell the idea to the promoters in a given territory, whether it's the U.S. or Asia or Europe, South America, America. I've got to convince the promoter to take a risk on these two other guys that come with me. And if they don't like one of them for whatever reason, then they don't invite us, and I have to go back to the drawing board. So this is why it takes about a year to get one off the ground, just to get, the two other guys to agree and be embraced by the promoters in the territory where we're going. Bit of an organizational nightmare, but it's worth doing. It always works out in the end, but it just takes a lot of work.
Well, and for this upcoming show on February 22nd, you had alluded to a bit, we have John Petrucci, of course, of Dream Theater fame, who I've had the honor of seeing with his band, and Phil Collen of Def Leppard, who I've had the honor of seeing several times with Def Leppard. It's an interesting mix of guitar styles for this tour, and I am very excited to see what it's going to sound like.
I didn't get a chance to meet and work with Phil until last August, when he was one of my superstars at the G4 Experience Camp in Carmel, California, and I was just so surprised at how deep his musicianship really ran. Of course, I was a fan of Def Leppard, and I was familiar with the music and the fact that he was a total pro, a great performer, player, writer. And with Delta Deep, I knew that he had this extra area of music, that he'd like to explore. But I think what really surprised everybody at the camp was how he was just like a real supernova. I mean, he lights up the room wherever he goes. He was great sitting in front of guitar players teaching him. He was great every time he walked on stage, super confident to play anything, and was up for any kind of improv. And then, of course, he had so many chops that you just, they were like hidden in his pocket, like you didn't know that he could play. It's crazy, as you can imagine. But every night that we've been on stage, and very often he's trading right after John Petrucci, who was a monster player. He is right up there with him, and we're having so much fun going back and forth every night. So that was a great surprise, and we were so lucky to have him for this U.S. run. That was something that just sort of became available right at the last minute as we were finalizing plans for this G3, and he called just to say, hey, look, I just got room for maybe 2 months before Def Leppard starts up again. So we jumped at the chance, and I'm so happy that he's joined us. And you mentioned John Petrucci. Of course, John, no stranger to G3. He's been on, I don't know, almost 10 of them maybe since 2001. We have a great chemistry together. Like Phil, John's like one of the nicest guys you'd ever want to hang out with. Great sense of humor, super confident, and of course his technique is just mind-boggling. Puts on a great show with his trio that features Mike Mangini and Dave LaRue, and then he comes out ready to play. And like Phil, they embrace improvisation 100%. I mean, we just go out there with not really knowing what we're going to try to explore every night, but we try to push each other in the friendliest way to see how crazy we can get, and the audience loves it. They obviously pick up on it every show we do.
And that actually leads perfectly into the next question I was going to ask. Is there a concrete set list for each show, or is it just kind of whatever kind of mood you guys are in?
Yeah, we've been, like most G3 tours, we start out with a big list of songs, and then at rehearsal we try to see what's really going to work. And I think at the heart of the matter is, sometimes you have like a great song, but it doesn't work when you try to make the song viable for 3 guitar players to do solos in. And so, not every song lends itself to that kind of stretching, right? And then if a song has too many parts, that means that you can't have the casual guest show up, like we had when Glenn Hughes just showed up, and Chad Smith in L.A., or Neil Sean jumping on stage in Oakland or DJ Ashford in Las Vegas. We have different players that just happen to show up, and if we're doing complicated songs, they can't actually join us because they missed rehearsal.
Sure.
So we try to keep the song simple enough so that it's easy to plug in a guest in case that happens. And it also means that the song is stretchable and that we can respond to how the audience is reacting. So that means we can make it longer just by, lifting of the eyebrow. We can extend the section, or we can move the soloists around. We can make space for, let's say, my keyboard player, Mike Keneally, to do a solo. So eventually we wind up with 3 songs that we really feel are the best ones, and we stick to that, for the bulk of the tour.
It's just amazing. I mean, it literally sounds like no 2 shows are ever the same, which
yeah,
which is almost unheard
right.
of.
You're absolutely right. It's interesting because what you just said brings up interesting anecdotes about how after every show, as we walk off stage, the first thing that Phil, John, and I do is just stand around and talk about what the 3 of us just played. And we're always extremely interested in what the other guy just did. And just like the little kid, we're just saying, how did you do that? And, when I did this and you came back and you used that finger. And, we're so curious and we're so excited about the show that we just want to talk about what just happened. And that always tells me that we're on to something good, that this is something that is creatively vital, artistically vital, as well as being just a lot of fun for the audience.
If you don't mind, Joe, and again, if we're delving into territory you don't want to go, I listened to your newest album that you just released, the What Happens Next, which I know is in G3, but I just had to tell you, I think it is one of the absolute best albums I've ever heard in my life. I cannot stop playing it. It is so good. So I wanted to make sure to bring that up so all the listeners know that it is out there, and it is so worthy of your time. This was, I believe, your 16th album. Am I right there?
That's right. Yeah, it's hard to believe. Yeah, 16th studio album.
Will we be treated to anything off that, perhaps on the 22nd? Maybe.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're actually playing 6 songs from the new album. So we're on stage for an hour playing our set, and I think we have a really exciting mix of the best of the last 30 years plus 6 of the new songs that seem to be the best in a live environment. It's interesting. You never really know what kind of a record you've made until you go out and you play it in front of people for a few years. So these last 3 weeks have been so exciting, just sort of exploring this new material. But the band I have with me is bringing life into this stuff that is surprising me every night. So I'm really happy, and the response has been great. So I got to say, I'm overwhelmed with joy that people have received this album so favorably.
Yeah, it's wonderful. I'm totally obsessed with Catbot. I cannot stop listening to it.
Great. Yeah, we're playing that live. Yes.
Oh, excellent. You'll hear me hooting and hollering out in the crowd on the 22nd. You guys, actually, when you hit us in Cleveland, you're really coming close to the end of your tour, or the U.S. leg of it, at least. Correct?
Yeah, that's right. I think we're a week away, or it's about the last week of the tour, I think. Come to think of it, it's funny. I don't really look ahead too much when I think, when I realize that I've got a big tour ahead of me, because it just starts to weigh me down. So I just take it one day at a time. But now that you mention it, you're right. Yeah, I think it's one of the last 4 shows we do. But then we only have about 2 weeks off, and then we're in Russia. So starting up the European.
Do the European leg, and if I'm reading correctly, you lose Phil Cullen at that point, and in comes the Scorpions guitarist. I can't remember his name. Uli John Roth.
Yeah, Uli John Roth. Yeah, the legendary Uli John Roth, who I actually did a G3 with back in '98. So it'll be a very interesting thing. I'm going to that European G3 with two guys that I've done G3 with before, John Petrucci and Louis John Ross, but those two guys have never played together before, so that's going to add to that sort of chemistry that I talked about earlier. That energy that comes with two people playing together for the first time is really, it's very exciting. It adds so much vital energy to the shows.
Oh, fantastic. Well, Joe, again, I cannot thank you enough for the time you've given me today. Just want to reiterate G3 at the Rocksino at Northfield on February 22nd. I went and checked before we recorded, Joe. There are not very many seats left, like hardly any. So if you're listening to this and you want to be there, I strongly suggest you do so, or you are going to be on the outside looking in. And again, Joe, thank you so much. I will see you on the 22nd.
All right. Thank you so much. It was great to talk to you.
Thank you.